Yo, it's a CypherTalk, and we're here with my buddy Josh. What's up, Josh? Introduce yourself, bro.
Yo. This is Josh Tamayo, a.k.a. Bboy Sugar Ray.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Retired.
Sugar Ray, like that pop band?
Yeah, Sugar Ray.
Or
No.
Sugar Ray Leonard?
Yeah, Sugar Ray Robinson, actually.
Sugar Ray Robinson. Oh, okay. How'd you get that name?
Oh, that's crazy, man. Actually, my original B-Boy name was Bboy Sugar because, Rashad Sugar Evans
Oh, yeah.
from UFC.
Sugar Rashad Evans,
Yeah,
yeah.
Sugar Rashad Evans. That guy was my dude. And then, Kevy used to always call me up and say, yo, your boy's fighting. And then one day, John Serla went up to me and he gave me this, you know how he drops knowledge and all that, right? So it was a moment of wisdom at Movado's. And then he was like, yo, how about Sugar Ray? And I was just like, wait a minute. He's like, yeah, because the way you B-boy is kind of like you want to fight somebody, right? and he says boxing is kind of like, they call it the sweet dance. It's almost like a science behind it. And Sugar Ray was more like a title as opposed to a name, because there was Sugar Ray Robinson and Sugar Ray Leonard. So he's like, oh, I bestow you the title Sugar Ray.
Whoa.
And I was just like, oh, sick. So it just caught on.
So Serla gave you that name?
Yeah, well, he kind of founded it, and it just caught on from there.
That's
Right,
sick.
it was a long time ago, but
That's probably the best way to get a name right, yo.
Yeah, when
I
someone
just
gives it
thought
to
of my own name, so. Let's start at the beginning, yo. How did you start with this breaking thing? Because I know you said you're retired, but like, how did you get started with it, and like, what's your journey like up until now with breaking?
that's crazy, man. It dates back all the way to like 1998 from a game called Bust a Groove.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, when me and my homies were just trying to figure out the moves, and we didn't know anything about the culture. It was more just the moves. Like, everyone knew what a flare was, and if you could do a flare, you were the man, just like broncos and slapjacks and all that, and backbreakers, right? The windmill, the old school one when you got to whip your leg, right? So there was three specific B-boys that stood out to me. One of them was B-boy Rector, Erlangala. And then there's another guy that went to my school, and this was when I was like 11 years old. His name was Vern Sampson. And then the other one was Johnny Lay.
Ooh.
Yeah, so it wasn't a time where I just committed. It was just patchy, right? So they showed me how to b-boy, well, at least how to do some moves. And then one day it was my cousin's debut, and her cousin was part of actually a crew called Final Clearance.
Oh.
Old school, right? And there was two specific b-boys at that party that stood out. One of them was SB Styles, right? And then the
Sonny
other,
Boy.
Sonny Boy, right? And the other guy was a man named Gabe Ballot, and they're part of the old Goodfoot crew. I think it was Goodfoot. But that's when my interest in breaking started. And then we started tuning into Battle of the Year. But at the time, right, there was nobody doing it. Well, I guess to my knowledge, no one was doing it. It was just me and my school. And then we were watching clips of Battle of the Year, and there's this one guy that did this crazy stack combo. And then I saw Mark San Juan actually do that same stack combo or similar to it at a concert or whatever. And that's when my mind was blown. I said, okay, that's it, man. I'm going to go up until 2001. And that's when I kind of fell off, right? Because I didn't know anybody, right? I knew Dangerous Goods crew. They were around. I never met anybody. But up until 2006, when I went to tech, my homie Joel was actually, I caught him like house dancing in the cafeteria, right? And it was just like, 5 years later, the nostalgia of seeing the b-boy for the first time was brought back. And then there was elements. There was like Brainiac, right? Brian Pangilinan. He showed me some crazy footwork, and I was just like, what is this, right? So I never knew b-boying was like that. I thought it was just all power and head spins and windmills and flares. But when I saw Brian throw down for the first time, that's when I was just like, holy smokes, man, this is crazy, right? And I think that's what got me started again in 2006, right? So yeah, it's been quite a ride since then.
Oh, yeah, man. We were talking before the podcast about how I'd see you and Kevy and a few others too, probably like Egg or something, come down to Sisler. You guys were skipping school, playing hooky. And you guys would break in one of the teachers' rooms, Mr. Martin's room.
Yeah.
And I would be there just like kind of chilling, watching and seeing you guys break with like Caldwell and like I think Chan was there, and a few others that I can't really remember. But yeah, and then I remember meeting you. I'm like, yo, man, I'm a crumper. I introduced myself as a crumper. Andrew's laughing right now because I was crumping at the time. I watched Rise, and I saw that documentary on crumping, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna start crumping. And I'm like, so yeah. Anyways, I was a crumper at that point in time. But yeah, I remember that. That was sick. But yeah, man, what are you up to now? What have you been doing as of recently?
Well, recently, I when I stopped breaking about almost 4 years ago now, I think it's just I started to get my career all serious. I became an entrepreneur, dabbling in the financial services industry. Educating myself on foreign exchange stocks, and hopefully later getting into real estate investing later on down the road. But it was just full of dedication about wanting to. I think what happened was Bob actually told me, man, wait till you reach the age of 25 and you won't be able to dance the same way. Mm-hmm. And that stuck to me mentally. And the day I turned 25, I was like, oh man, it kind of turned off already. So my body was like completely sore. And then I said, okay, well, I guess what Bob says is true. So I got to go, start my career, start my life already, right?
Yeah.
Let's see what happens. How
tough was it to do that? Because I believe at one point you're really like deep into the art form. And I would see you at jams all the time. And then almost all of a sudden you weren't there and you're chasing a dream, right? Mm-hmm. So how difficult was that, making that kind of transition and being like, because it takes some discipline to do that. So how was that process?
I think at the time it was very difficult because it wasn't me just leaving the scene. It was me leaving a lifestyle. Right, because it was, to us, it was more than just breaking. You get to party with your homies, and to me, clearly, those times with my crew, those were the moments that stuck out to me even till today. There's a lot of valuable memories that came out of that. We came together for breaking. So when I was leaving, when I decided that maybe I'm getting too old or maybe it's just time for me, whatever my mindset was at the time, it was hard because I was leaving my friends. I was leaving the culture of having fun and whatnot, right? But looking back at it now, it's I kind of remember it, but I don't remember the pain anymore of me completely stopping b-boying, right? Mm-hmm. So
that with entrepreneurship, and then again we're gonna get into like probably various subjects, but what do you think? What kind of advice would you give to people who are trying to get into that kind of field or looking for something more beyond what they currently have?
It's a good question, man. Like, my advice always is just do it, right? Because there's a lot of people out there, they talk and they plan and they kind of spend their whole lives figuring stuff out. And, there's somebody once told me that smart people don't win in entrepreneurial field, right? It's because they want to figure things out all the time. But the people that actually go on and do big things are the ones that just go out and do it. Mm-hmm. They're not afraid to fail. They go out and they screw up. They go out and they screw up, and they go out and they succeed. Yeah. Right. So it's just about really you don't know your options until you actually get your feet wet. Right. So my advice is just get your hands dirty, go in there, meet people, and you never know what might transpire.
Right. And I think also people think that they have to know everything about a certain subject before they dive in, but that's like impossible to know. Like you can't know everything about breaking before you start actually doing like the basic moves, right? Or start learning. Because you never get started. Same thing with any other subject, right? So I think people, I agree with you there.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no way you can learn everything. I think even the people who are so far, whether it's dance or whether it's business, I think that you're forever learning, because there's always, it's like, as you elevate, your world elevates with you. So you're not the same person as you were before. You can't know everything. And I think the people who want to know everything about everything before they do anything don't end up doing anything anyway.
No.
Right?
They look at this struggle like, oh shoot, like what about this or what about that? And I think they lose the point of actually starting it, or like why would they even do it, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Like they lose the reason why. They just look into all the facts and all that kind of stuff.
Well, what you'll find too is like when it comes to that kind of stuff is you gotta find your reason as to why you want to pursue it. A lot of if you're in it for just money, then you're not gonna make it. You know, but if you're in it because you know what that money will do for you, then there's a different scenario, right? Because yeah,
it's a deeper meaning for sure. And I've have you seen this guy? His name is Simon Sinek.
Oh yeah,
On his TED Talks.
yeah, absolutely.
And his speeches and all his presentations and stuff. It's how he has talked about the golden circle, having your reason why you do it, like your main, like what's your motivation, and then working from that why out to the how and then what, rather than the other way around. So I figured that like, again, like money wouldn't be like money. Obviously, I think money is just a byproduct of you going after like your dream, like what your huge why, what's your reason for doing it. So I don't think it's I don't think money is going to be like the end result. It's like, this is the, because I feel like there's not going to be enough money for that to be fulfilling in your life, right?
Well, absolutely. If you actually study the people who are wildly successful in that area, money's like the least of their concerns. It's the same thing as b-boying, right? Are you in it for the recognition? Are you in it just so then the crowd will love you? Or are you in it because, you know, you want to achieve something you've never achieved before? That those hurdles or those mountains where you felt like you couldn't surpass, like, you know, when everyone wants to hit an air flare and it's just that one thing that's holding you back, you know, what is it that you're in it for? And I think the people who have a bigger reason, as opposed to those materialistic things like money or fame or whatever, I think those people go far because it's deeper, right? It's deeper rooted.
Yeah, that's a really important point. And I think that's where a lot of connections between dance and different subjects go, because if you're trying to really understand the dance and move forward with the dance, you're looking at the basics, you're trying to flip it, you're trying to achieve something, and there's a struggle period. There's like, you have a vision of what you want to do, right? And then you have your struggle period where you have to work through it, and then you eventually like win over that certain thing and get to the victory where you're like, oh, I have this move down. And I think that's more apparent with b-boys because they have to do these difficult, like really demanding moves that take a lot of time and effort to do. And then once they get it, like, oh, I got it. So how can you apply that now to different aspects of your life where you're winning in other things?
Well, that's, you know, like, I'm glad you asked that, because I remember it just brings me back to when we first started breaking. It wasn't just you and your crew. There was other crews out there that was getting better if you weren't, right? And it's like, maybe you can master that windmill or master that combo, and then all of a sudden it's like it's not really a race, but you realize that it's not just about you. And when you finally get that windmill to halo combo, you got a guy in another crew doing a windmill halo baby mill combo, and they just top you, right? So you always got to move up and get better. But when you look at that in life too, it all boils down to, one, why you want to do it, and two, do you want it bad enough? Right? Because right now, like you know, you said it, right? It's the money's just a byproduct. And if you look at to an underlying desire as to why you want to be successful in whatever you want to do, I think that propels you forward. Because if it's material, let's say you want to make, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Once you get there, so what? Then what?
Yeah.
Right? But what are you going to do with that? You know, what kind of a legacy do you want to leave, or how do you want people to know you as? Right? And it goes back to b-boying too. Like, you got a lot of examples right now in the city. Like, for instance, I'll mention like Winston. Like, that guy's just a nonstop machine. Like, you see him right now, right? And I look at that, and you could really see that even when we were session back in the day, he was so focused. He kept to himself. He just looked down. He just watched the sweat drop off his hair, and he would just go, because if he wanted something, he'd go get it. I never really asked him, you know, what drove him, but you could feel that already. And it was beyond just winning battles. It was beyond, you know, just getting, you know, noise from the crowd and whatnot, right? It was something that was deeper.
I think for him and for many dancers, it's just that personal level of achievement. Like, oh, I struggled through this thing, and I achieved this, and I could do this. Like, it takes like some pride. Like, oh yeah, I can do this now because I put in the work. towards that. And it's just like enjoying the art form too, right? Like we talk about hard work, but also it's just enjoying the process of that, which I think sometimes it could be frustrating, but I feel um, there's a certain level of like when you're working towards a goal, there's a certain kind of satisfaction or an enjoyment towards achieving that, right? If you're not if you're not going after a worthwhile goal, it feels like you're, I don't know, maybe you're like unhappy or something like that. But if you're actually going for something, it's like, okay, there's a certain satisfaction that goes with that.
No, absolutely. And I think what we have to be aware of as people too is that even if we set a goal at this time and age right now, as we progress towards that, we don't realize that our goals change too. It's like as we move forward, it's like the distance between us and our goals, it moves with us, right? And then what we once thought were big goals like before are even like bigger later on. You look back at where you come from, it's like, holy smokes, I didn't realize it would have been this far. And what you asked for before, it's like so small right now, right? Mm-hmm. So I think you got to grow, and it is frustrating, but frustration is fuel for growth, right? And if you're not frustrated, if you're not having challenges, you're not doing it right.
Right. Yeah, exactly. You're not having enough, you're not growing enough. And the thing that I think about too is that if you're, I don't know, like what that thing with growing pains,
mm-hmm.
like it takes a little bit of hurt to grow. Even with like if working out, right? Like if you're working out, if it's not, there's supposed to be a certain kind of pain or struggle associated with your growth. If there isn't, then you're not really growing, right?
Absolutely. And to be honest with you, that's where most people quit, right? When it gets tough. But I think it's like, that pain that you get, even when you go to the gym, you tear your muscles up and you grow it back bigger. And they don't realize that pain is just a distraction, right? How bad do you really want it? Mm-hmm. A lot of people, I think that they're falling in love with the idea of being successful in whatever they choose, but they don't want to actually be successful. They want it if it's easy, right? But they're not willing to put together what they want at the end, and then work a plan backwards and working at that every day, right? As soon as it becomes hard, it's like, oh man, this ain't meant for me. I'm gonna quit, right? So
it's a discomfort that I feel you have to embrace if you're going to achieve anything, right? And one thing that stuck with me, I remember reading this book. I don't remember which book it came from though, but it was like, or I heard it somewhere. It went something like, the hardest things in life are the most worthwhile things.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Like you think of like, I'm taking weird analogies here, but a child being birthed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like naturally that would hurt a lot, right? And there's pain in there, but then the success is that baby being born.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that come out through pain and struggle and hard work, and people I feel like they have to embrace that discomfort to get to a certain point.
That's 100% right. Like somebody once told me too, like one of my mentors, that comfort is the enemy of greatness. Is because what happens is when people who are willing to go through that, right, they know exactly what to talk about looking backwards in retrospect. But the people who choose to avoid it and thinking that they're going to be successful without actually going through the mud and all the trenches and whatnot, what kind of a story can they tell? There's really not much wisdom and knowledge in that. But if you compare it to someone who's actually gotten their feet wet and their hands dirty, those are the people who come up with the greatest experiences, right? It's supposed to be frustrating. It's supposed to be challenging. That's character building, right?
Yeah. And I think it's like pain and failure is also a great teacher. I feel like that's one of the biggest things that people can take away from failure, because people think that if they fail once or twice or something like that it's like, oh no, I guess it's not for me. No, like you're supposed to learn something from that failure. And I feel now I'm kind of drifting, but in the school system, they teach failure as like they use failure as something as like you shouldn't be failing at all. Mm-hmm. Like once you fail, you're like it's over, right? Like you failed your class, but they don't use that as a teaching tool, I feel, for the most part. So I think that you have to fail, and I think people have to be educating other people that failure is good in a certain sense to move forward and move on with success?
Oh, you're 100% right. I'll be honest. The school system, that's a different topic, right? But that's completely, we can go off on that. And I think, but you're right. Looking back at it now, I remember when me and the crew used to practice on Wednesdays and Thursdays at Transcona Studio there when Dono had the studio open. My biggest regret looking back at it now is when I see them practice, when I see the Pandas practice, they would continue. They would go, and even if in the midst of failure, they would either slow down, but they would keep moving. And for me, my biggest mistake is I would always stop, right? Whenever I would try to pull off a combo, and in my mind, I was like, oh man, these guys are naturals, these guys, but not really realizing that that's hard work and years that they put into earning that, making those moves happen, those combos happen. And for me, when I would get frustrated, I would stop, I would crash, and I would just start over, always starting over, and I look back at it, those were the biggest lessons though. It taught me, now translating in life, you just got to keep moving, right? So I look back, was it failure at the time? Probably, but looking at it now, it's just like, man, those were the biggest lessons, right?
I think Ivan told me one of the biggest things that resonated with me, and at the time I was taken aback by it, because he would watch me. Like I remember I went to a few of those sessions with you guys at Dono Studio, right, or DBSD in Transcona, and Ivan would be watching me, and he's like, "Oh, that's why you're gonna lose. You're gonna lose because you stop." Because you got to keep going, even if you mess up. Just like keep going and finishing strong. Like one thing when you're speaking there was that you realize that all those, like, underestimating yourself and overestimating others is a big thing. Like, I'm not really good enough, or these people have a natural ability that I don't have, or whatever it is, when in reality maybe they've just been doing it longer and have put more time into it and effort, and you're just starting out, maybe you've been doing it for only a year. So I feel like people should not overestimate other people's capabilities, and have more belief in themselves as far as what they can do, because it should be encouraging to see people succeed. Like, oh, this guy could do it, okay, I could do it. Yeah, we come from the same neighborhood, we come from the same background, okay, I could do that too.
Yeah, so that's 100%. Like somebody once told me, again, one of my mentors, he was saying, compete but don't compare, right? Because we're all different. Everybody's situation is unique, but I think to a point you kind of have to look back and kind of compare too. Is like, what's their mentality going into it? Like I look back at the things that I couldn't do when I was breaking, and I look at somebody like Kevy, right? And I look at somebody like Egg or Ivan. I said, man, these guys must have some natural ability, but really, you look at it, you step back, you take the breaking away. It's like we're all just regular people who just got passionate and put in the work. So they deserve that, right? They deserve to be able to pull those moves off, right? So I think that I kind of stopped comparing myself and just had to realize that, man, if I want to be as good as these guys are, I got to put in some work, right? So
yeah. And I want to kind of talk about this as well, because you probably know Kevy better than we do, and we're cousins. We're cousins with him. Me and Andrew are second cousins or something like that. I don't remember exactly what the term is. But
you're all Tolentinos, that's why.
Yeah. It was funny because me and Andrew and I guess our part of the family grew up on the north side, and then him and his family, they grew up on the west side. Yeah. And so what could you tell us about Kevy and how you guys kind of connected at first? Because I don't really know that story.
Right. Well, I told you earlier, what brought me back in 2006 to b-boying again was, my best friend Joel. And then he's like, all right, I told him, you got to show me the ways. You remember when WIT happened at the basketball championships or whatever? So he's like, all right, if you're serious, you're going to meet me here at this time. And it was at the dance studio at the back of the cafeteria at Tech. And I went, and he had these jams, I was like, holy smokes, the old school music and Earth, Wind, and Fire. And we were grooving, and he was housing, and then enter Kevy. And he walked in, he's like, yo, this is my friend Kevin. And he didn't really talk much at the time when we met for the first time. He was quiet. But I remember looking at him, I said, yo, can you do windmills? and he did windmills. And then later on, I started seeing him do flares and stuff. And I guess over time, Joel continued to just bring me over to the Pandas practices. Now, I wasn't in the Pandas yet. I was crewless at the time, right? But once I started to see Kevy dance, you could really see that it was years and years of not just practice, but it was the immersion of the culture. Because his brother was heavily involved in the b-boy community too. He grew up that way, right? But when you look back at it now, it's the mentality's different, right? Like, it was his mentality about breaking that, I guess, separated him from the rest.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's interesting, man. Like one of the things that I realized too is like, this is kind of weird how me and Kevy started like connecting over dance after a while. I was like, I found out he was, because I used to see him at like socials and stuff or birthday parties, and he would break a little bit, and his brother too. But I didn't really know it until one of the Break for Breads, I think it's 2006 or 7, where I saw Kyle Rude when he was like breaking it with Dangerous Goods. I'm like, oh shit, my cousin's part of that crew. And then I remember seeing Kevy there. I was like, oh shoot. And then later on, us being both part of the dance scene in a way. But it's just interesting to hear like how you met him, and even hearing Egg talk about him too, because they have a really close relationship as well. Yeah. But it's just an interesting thing that it's like, oh, that was happening while I was just like doing my own thing at like my high school or whatever. So what's this thing I hear about you? You're breaking again. You started up again.
Well, you know what? Like, I think in the beginning it was more like a fitness thing. Me and my boy Joel, we've been out of the scene for almost 4 years now. We just focus on our careers and business. But it was more, we got some free time now. We were gonna consider doing boxing, just to get into some cardio, or even, but it's hectic, like hours and stuff like that, and what's available. And we were even gonna go back to the gym just to start lifting again, but it's kind of tedious, and we were making a bunch of these excuses, and all of a sudden he was just like, man, if I can get keys to a studio, you down to break again? So I talked to my buddy Patrick Hilario, and he's like, because he's been consistent in the b-boy scene even till today, and I was like, if we go back, we got to learn from somebody. So he's like, yo, let's go. And we were actually gonna start a side crew, just for fun, and we'll see how serious it goes, right? But now we're planning to get back just to see what we could do, and hopefully it turns out it'll be nice to be able to get into the groove again, right?
It will be exciting to see you guys, even if you guys just kind of competed for fun at some jams. It'll be like, oh snap, see, like, man, you could come back from whatever it is whatever you were doing before, and even if you take a break and everything. Because I think again, like, you're gonna be more knowledgeable on things, I guess the second time around or third time around, rather than just kind of going into it like raw and stuff like that. So
yeah, I think physically it's gonna be, obviously you got to get used to it again. But like a lot of people will tell you, it's like riding a bike; it never leaves you. You still got to put in some work, though. It's not like you could just do the same moves. You still got to put in some practice. You got to break some sweat. But I think mentally, though, I think that's what's really going to make the difference. If you want to pursue something, I think where I'm at mentally, if I could talk to my old self, when I was very active in the b-boy scene, I would have told myself, man, just stop giving up all the time, and just stop starting over, and like just keep going.
Yeah.
Right. So I think mentally now it's going to be a lot easier, but I got to accept the fact that physically it's going to be challenging, right?
You got to take steps, bro.
Yeah,
you gotta
exactly.
Take steps towards that thing. You can't take a giant leap. I'm going to go from here to over there.
Yeah. No, I got inspired too, right? Because I see how everyone's evolved. I see Winston everywhere on all the battles. I see Doodles. I see Patrick a lot too. And it's refreshing to see how far these guys have taken it. Mm-hmm. And I ran into one of my old homies. He's still a good friend of mine, Nap.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So we were actually supposed to start a crew a long time ago, and it was called God, Groove Overdose. So we're bringing that back, right? So that's going to be our crew name now. If we were to take this thing seriously, right, we're going to come back as Groove Overdose. So as a side thing, I'm always going to be repping PPC. Mm-hmm. But as a side thing with the three of us, me, myself, Joel and Patrick. Yeah, we're gonna give that a shot. Groove Overdose.
Nice.
Yeah.
So how did you get down with Paranormal Pandas? Because I don't know that story as well. Like I'm sure people are curious to know about that.
Well, it was when I first started. Mark Bale and myself. You remember Mark Bale, right? Like we started nearly at the same time. We were both mentoring under Joel. So he exposed us to the Winnipeg Bboy scene. Because again, when I started in '98, I didn't know there was a scene, right? I didn't even know there was a culture. So in '06, we came back, and this is when, like what was behind the curtain kind of things. There was like a whole bunch of different crews, and there was a jam called Keep the Beat.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
At Daniel Mac. So we were the multi-purpose room or whatever you call it at Daniel Mac. We'd do practices there, and then I would see the Pandas come. Right, there was Kevy, there was Egg, there was Brian, Joel was there, San Jose, Chris Jupiter. He showed up a lot, and Irvin Belingit. We called him Frisco back in the day, right? And when they were preparing for a crew to compete at Keep the Beat, and I went up to Kevy. I was like, bro, can I roll with you guys? He's like, I think we're packed, man. Why don't you maybe go try hollering at Ivan? And that's when Ivan and like Gerard and Kizza, they had Meiji.
Oh,
right.
okay.
And then so I battled with them, and then we ended up becoming the crew afterward. We were Meiji from there. So we battled at Keep the Beat like that. Over time, it's because a lot of the members went to the same school together. There was Meiji and there was PPC. And then whoever stuck around, both crews kind of ended up collaborating because they all went to Kelvin. At the time, I was the oldest one, right? So I had more time to myself. I finished college and stuff like that. I was always at the open gyms at General Wolf, breaking. But because my crew was in school still, we couldn't really always sesh together. Does that make sense? So when they did at school, they ended up like whoever stuck around, and Meiji ended up falling into the Pandas. At that time, I was training a lot with SWAT and B-Boys by mistake. So those were they were actually originally QBC, and they split up, right? So SWAT was like Rector, Jorik, Johnny Lay, and Reaper, Mike Champ, right? So there was those guys, but then I also worked with like Nap and Vanak and all those guys, right? So over time, that was a period of where I think that's where I started to learn a lot.
Yeah.
From those two, and then they ended up collaborating back as Weapon QPC that one Break for Bread when Earl did the Lotus 1990.
Oh, I think I hear about. I don't know. I don't think I was there when he was. I there? I don't even know. But I keep hearing about that Lotus 1990.
It was crazy, right? But over time, like I think Meiji started falling apart, where because of a friend, it was more like they went to school together, so there was a bigger bond through friendship that was being built there. So it was like Egg went to Kelvin, Kevy went to Kelvin, Ivan and Gerard and Hector went to Kelvin, and the only people that didn't go was like myself and Kizza, right? So when they started forming, over time, we still party with them, we still like chill with them, and when we went together as Central Beatheads at one Break for Bread when we at the Maples multiplex.
Yeah.
And I think that was a start of kind of seeing where we would end up as Meiji Boys. And then later on, I think years later, right after they recruited Jamal, they got Jamal down. And then right after that, I think they had a meeting at Kevio's house, and they were kind of plotting on seeing like what they could do to get me down. And they just called me out at the practice.
Yeah.
And then we went 8 rounds. And then I was like gassed out, right? Kevy always goes up to me, he's helped me up, and he's like, "You down to be a panda?" I was like, "Hell yeah, let's go." Right? So shit. I remember that. And after that, I'll tell you, man, it was more than just b-boying. It was like the way of the panda. Everything started being open. I felt like I was on some high. I was like, holy shit, like the world looks different now, right? But yeah, that's how it was. So
well, that's incredible because of the fact that Paranormal Pandas, like their effect on the Winnipeg street dance scene, because like right up there is Dangerous Goods, and then you think of Paranormal Pandas, and I feel like that's an interesting thing to think about, because I sometimes I guess paranormal pandas are kind of in the background, especially now. But like at one point, it was like, oh man, it would be sick. Like I remember me, it was like, oh, it would be awesome to be part of the pandas, see what they're doing, and like everybody like was at one point really vibing with like everybody in that crew. It's like insane. I forgot what I was gonna go into. We often go into lulls like this, but yeah, man, like that's pretty that's a sick story. You down to be a panda? Like,
yeah. No, I'll tell you. Like, I'm pretty sure. Like, I felt that way too. Like, I was like, man, I was chilling with these guys, and man, I'd be down to be a panda, right? But then I think, it was just a moment in time, right? It was just where it happened, and I think it was less of acquisition of who to become a member, but it was a very tight circle. Like I remember clearly, it was just when we got Winston down, right? We battled him like forever. Yeah. And then I remember Kevy was saying like, "Oh, that's it. No, that's it. This is the cap of the crew."
Right.
And it was just a faint conversation, but I think there was the thing that I really appreciated about that was, was it always gravy? I was like, no. In fact, like, there was the fact that I wasn't down with the crew right away. I kind of left me questioning. Why am I chilling, but I'm not even down, right? So I was extremely thankful when, when they called me out. It was like, oh man, here it comes, right? The battle, and then everyone's after you. But it was a moment in time. I look at it, I was like, man, that was crazy, right?
Do you think that's still happening in high schools now with breaking crews? Because you just name dropped a whole bunch of people and like crews and stuff. But do you think that's still happening in today's culture in high school with breaking?
I'd hope so. I mean, I say that for a particular reason, right? It's because I hope the culture doesn't die. I hope that it doesn't. I hope there's enough people out there really mentoring the younger generation and bringing them up. It's not fair for me to say no or yes because I haven't actually been in high schools.
Yeah.
But I hope it does. I hope it continues. As what it's done for me, I look back, I look where I'm going, I look back at where I come from. It's because of that actually helped me, I guess, develop my character into knowing what I want and knowing how to get it, right? But I hope it does. That's all. I can't really say too much about if it is or not.
What have you seen evolve from the dance scene that's like a lot different than when you first started in, like, I guess I'll say since 2006? Like, what do you think is different now? Well, actually, that's like freaking 11 years.
Yeah.
Yo, what's different? Holy crap, we're old, bro.
Yeah, man. It time flies. It's a, this is probably one of those topics that, we can go on forever about, right? And I think that the most important thing, what was different, I think the Bboy scene was definitely a lot bigger before. The dance scene is growing. That's what I would say. The dance scene, in terms of mix of b-boying and choreographers and whatnot. But when I think about b-boying, I think about hip hop, and I think it's evolving, but I don't really necessarily think it's really growing in the direction that we'd like to see it. Let's face facts. This is a opinionative subject, right? And I'm sure, like, even yourself and like we were talking about earlier, how like Egg can go on this forever, right? Yeah. So the reason why I'm bringing it up that way, I think the dance scene is growing, but I hope the understanding and the culture of hip hop and what it really is doesn't die, and I hope it doesn't evolve backwards. Like, when you think about evolution, you think about small things growing bigger, right? But evolution is just your adaptivity to your environment. But where's the environment in Winnipeg right now, right? So the only thing I'm saying is that what's different is I think that the knowledge and the history and the understanding of the culture is kind of taking a step back a bit,
right?
Especially with the new people coming up. I'm not necessarily saying b-boys, but I think that's a very important role.
How would you say you kind of develop in the scene in knowing that kind of history or the knowledge behind the hip hop culture? Because it seems like almost in a way, and you could tell me if this is right or wrong, that when you were coming up, it was something that was more readily available. Like somebody would point you in the right direction and be like, yo, this is where you learned this or whatever.
Yeah,
and you
yeah.
kind of get like, it's more exposed to it was more exposed to you back then than it is now, in a sense, because people don't promote it. Is that something that's like true, or do you think that it's just
I think it's a
thing?
huge part. I'll be honest with you. Like again, it's not that there's anything wrong with either side, but I agree 100%. And there's going to be a lot of people that have different opinions about this. But back in the day, you did have a lot of people pointing you in the right direction. And then the one thing I think about is when you think about the hip hop culture in general, when you mentioned that, people promoting it, I don't necessarily think that it's a lack of promotion. I think it's almost a misinformed promotion about it. Like, how is it that, when you think about parents dropping their children off to hip hop dance class, and what do you expect to see? To me, when I think of hip hop dance class, I think of b-boying, because the culture is upheld by 4 pillars, right? Yeah, I b-boying, MCing, DJing, and graffiti.
Yeah.
Right? And there's a fine line between hip hop and choreography, or like b-boying and choreography. Does that make any sense? So when I look at how is it that I don't hear that if parents are going to drop their kids off to hip hop dance class, you look in the window and what do you see? Choreo. And there's nothing wrong with choreo, but let's call it what it is, right? It's not, you can't just say, oh, it's hip hop. How come we don't hear, Cool Herc? How come we don't hear Grandmaster Flash or African Bambaataa or Zulu? We don't hear none of that anymore.
Yeah.
Right? But you do in the b-boy scene, because that's what it is. The b-boying is the pillar of hip hop, right? So it's more, I think it's, if people understand and grasp the knowledge of the history and the true culture of it, then you'll start to decipher, what's actually growing and what's not. That's why I say, yes, the dance scene is growing, but the hip hop scene is kind of evolving backwards. Does that make any sense? So.
Yeah, like it's interesting to see that, because you go to a hip hop class, say that in quotations, hip hop class, and you don't know what you're gonna get, because you could be getting, like, it could be just a naming thing. Like, if you call it hip hop, people kind of like see it just as it's a street dance type thing, right?
Yeah.
So, but then that could be very broad, right? Like, if my classes are still called hip hop at the studio that I teach at, just because of, I don't know, they don't want to change the name. I asked them to change the name, but hopefully that's going to be something that's going to be changed soon. But it could be like it could be me teaching popping. That could be like a hip hop class, right? Or it could be a locking class, or it could be like a street jazz, or it could be or it could be a breaking, because that's what hip hop is, right? The first original dance is breaking,
right?
So what are you gonna get? I don't know. Like, that's the thing that I feel people should start changing the titles to everything. But then again, hip hop is the buzzword where it sells, right? Like, oh, it's hip hop. Oh,
Well, if you think about this for a second, I remember, like, I had back in my college days. Have you ever tried here's an analogy, right? Have you ever tried frog legs?
No.
Right? Frog legs in France is a delicacy, right? And when people eat it, a lot of people say, oh, it tastes like chicken. Have you heard of that saying before?
Yeah.
Tastes like chicken. And I'm like, dude, you got to find a better way to describe what your frog legs taste like, because you can't just say it tastes like chicken, because it's not chicken, right? You got to find a better description to see what otherwise, because it's frog legs, right? And it's the same thing, right? If you take a look at the culture now, there's a lot of choreographers that are coming up, and there's nothing wrong with that. But again, call it what it is, right? You can't just say it. Maybe they're immersed in the hip hop culture. It's like if you and I were invited to an East Indian wedding. Yeah, we're sharing their culture, we're sharing their joy, we're sharing their celebration, but that doesn't make us East Indian, right? It doesn't make it at all, right? So it's like, again, going back to the knowledge of hip hop, where it comes from, rooted in breaking and DJing, MCing, and you want to, for me, I'd like to hear that kind of stuff, right? I'd like to hear about Cool Herc and Grandmaster and Zulu, and instead of just saying that when you hear about hip hop, you look into the hip hop dance class and it's completely something different, right? Yeah. Choreography is choreography, right? Hip hop is hip hop. Let's not get that confused. Right?
I think you're starting to see a bit of more of the name changing as far as that goes, though, because some people are saying like urban choreography, or they're putting a different name to it rather than just hip hop, right? Sometimes you see choreography attached to it, and it's providing a bit of divide of like where the lines are with the categories, which is kind of good. But there's still a lot that like I think I taught at this one studio, and they still didn't know. They didn't really know anything about hip hop, and it's I find it ridiculous because you have the internet there and you have like all this information like that's there. But it's just people don't want to look at it, or they're too lazy, or something. Something's preventing them from looking at it, and it's kind of a shame because you lose out on like the richness of the culture.
I agree, and I'm not saying that at any point I'm not saying that choreography is bad or there's anything wrong with it. I think it is what it is, but let's not mix it up. Let's not pretend, you're 100% right. Look into it. Like how many, I can't count now, like how many people that I ran into and they don't even know who the founders, they don't even know like the history of the culture. And like, how can you say that you are what you are if you don't even know where you come from? Yeah. Right. And that's the biggest thing. Like I said, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I just say it's something that needs to be maybe addressed. And that's why when I say it's not, the dance scene is growing, but growing means you're getting bigger in what's already there. Evolving is different. Evolving is adapting to your environment. And what's the environment right now in the scene that I see? A lack of knowledge, a lack of exploration into the history. I think once that's fixed, I think a lot of things will turn out to be different, right?
Yeah, I think you just got to categorize things properly, but then you can't categorize things unless you know about the styles.
Absolutely.
Right? So
I was going back and forth with this, like, there's probably going to be a lot of, it's controversy sometimes when you think about it, because whatever side you choose to practice your dance. But if you think about the hip hop in general, again, b-boying, MCing, DJing, and graffiti, there's always that element of battle between the two, right? Why? Because there are basic fundamentals that need to be addressed, right? Like if you have a b-boy, sometimes you see those like ridiculous b-boys that have like crazy style and everyone, ooh, right? Like, like b-boy issue. Okay. Right? Like nothing wrong with that but again, it's all rooted off of fundamentals, right? And if you do a 6-step, we're talking about doing 6 steps earlier. What are you judged on? How well you do it fundamentally, or how well you present yourself with style? Mm-hmm. What is it, right? There's basic moves, there's basic fundamentals, even in graffiti, even in DJing, right? Even in MCing, the bars you spit, that people look for in terms of deciphering the art of battle. But can you do that in choreography? Like, tell me a fundamental move that's there that everybody could learn in choreography.
Yeah, sometimes there isn't, or most of the time there isn't.
Absolutely. So how do you even decipher a battle between the two, right? Is it just favorites? Like who looked better, And I'm like, if that was the case, then man, like the whole world of battle with b-boying would be completely different. But now you understand what I'm saying, right? It's like the culture is like completely, it's evolved. I'll say that quotation.
Well, I'm glad that me and Patrick, we took this adjudication course, and it's for dance. But and for us to get certified as adjudicators is like a really awesome thing, because now we can bring some of that knowledge that we have about our specific dance styles to like the stage performance. Because people still don't know. People still, and it's shocking to me that's still happening. But it's a way of us kind of just like educating people, like, okay, because a lot of times when I don't know if you know this, like when students perform on stage, they're obviously doing their teacher's choreography, and it's mainly on the shoulders of the teachers to be teaching the proper things, and if they're not, then we have to address it in a certain way, so that people could digest it and also learn from it. So that's part of the reason that I'm excited that me and Patrick are going to be adjudicators and get booked for like adjudication processes and stuff like that. Now you touched on the battling and stuff. Battling is another thing that's kind of a subject that's often debated, because people have different criteria when they're judging, and sometimes in the heat of the moment they might make a decision that's not like that they wouldn't usually make. What do you think about battles today? Well, since we're in Winnipeg, we'll talk about the local scene. What do you think about battles today and how they're going on?
I think, that can stretch out into so many different ways. I think it depends on the format of the battle. That's why we have judges, right? You pick your judges, and then they're entitled to their opinion, and that's why there's 3 or 4 or 5, right? Because now it's the law of averages. It's not bias and whatnot, right? The battling that I always prefer to see is, again, the one-on-one, or the crew-on-crew, based out of fundamentals, right? Because we know it's a b-boy battle, right? I think the whole idea right now, I've been seeing a lot of all styles battles, and again, nothing wrong with it. This is just my opinion. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, right? But it's kind of hard. Which is better, apples or oranges, right?
You're comparing two different things.
It's a pretty wide swing.
Yeah.
So when you have a b-boy and you have a freestyler and they're going at it, but 2 out of the 3 judges are b-boys.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so what do you call that? How do you call that a battle? It's like, here, I'm a boxer and we're going to go into the UFC octagon and I'm going to fight someone who practices Tai Chi. And there's no knockouts allowed. It's just judging. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right? So it's just it's almost like a heavy mix. And if that's the way people prefer it, I'm saying it's a lot of fun. It's entertaining. But if you're going back to the root of battling, then that's a totally different twist on that, right? Different game.
It gets super difficult, I think, to judge those types of battles.
Yeah.
Because even I've had this discussion with certain other people about, what if the b-boy, say it's a b-boy versus a choreography dancer, right? The b-boy does crazy power in one round, and then the same round, the choreography guy kills the beat. Who wins that round? It's like, how do you even judge that? It would depend on who's actually judging it.
Absolutely. It all goes down. That's why we have judges, right? And you can't really, and a lot of people will agree or disagree with judges' decisions, but that's why you have more of them, right? That's why there's always 3, 5, whatever judges, right? So then that way it's collective experiences. And again, there's nothing wrong with it, but it always, for me, in my mind, it always goes back to, like, let's not pretend it's something that it's not. Like, call it what it is. Are you hip hop dancer? Because last time I checked, the only real hip hop dance was what? B-boying.
Yeah.
Right? Or are you a choreographer? Or how do you judge it? You're right, absolutely right. It's kind of like a mix. But that's what it is for the entertainment now, right? That's what it's evolved to. And that's why I'm saying is evolution is completely different from growth. Okay? Growth is having the same thing multiply itself and grow into something bigger.
Yeah.
Right. But evolution will always change into whatever its surroundings present itself to be. Right.
Right. And then the surroundings in this case are that there are different types of dancers, and you could include more dancers in a battle because the scene is not as big, or maybe not a lot of people want to enter.
Absolutely. And to add to that, even the lack of knowledge, like you said, right? That difference in knowledge and who you represent and where you come from changes the entire dynamic on where you're going.
I remember this quote from, it's kind of a quote from Buddha Stretch, and he's he's the reason why it's called hip hop dance, and he's like responsible for why it's called like a freestyle hip hop dance.
Yeah.
Is that I'll try to remember it, but it was like you could do anything because you don't know anything, something along those lines. Like if somebody doesn't know anything, then like it's not, I mean, you can't really, I don't even know where I'm going with that.
Yeah. Well, there's a similar quote that actually resonates too. I can't remember who said it, but it's, if you don't fight for something, you'll fall for anything. Right? And it's the same thing. If you're going to fight for something, you know exactly why. So that means you know where you come from and you know exactly what you're working towards. But if you don't, then you'll fall for anything. And that's why, when you said that, do people do that nowadays in high schools, get people down? I hope they do. Right? It's because it goes beyond just what you can do as a dancer, right? A lot of it has to do with character, because there's no sense in doing something. This is my opinion. There's no sense in doing something if you can't even duplicate yourself. Like when we were growing up as b-boys in Meiji, I don't know if you know this story, but you remember the Bionic Bunny crew?
Okay, yeah.
You know where they were founded in?
No.
In my carport.
Oh, what?
Yeah. It's because they had a couple of people who wanted to learn how to dance, and all I did was provide a space. Now, I don't take any glory or credit for what they're able to accomplish, but that birthplace was because I opened up my carport as a practice place, right? And I was able to duplicate myself there, right? And that's where the Bionic Bunnies were born, right? Il Phil, Kevin Castro, Jed, and Justin Villegas, they all came from from that one. I had this like, you know, those old Dutch signs.
Yeah.
Like it was like a plastic cardboard. We had that, and we just threw it down on the cement, and then boom, the bionic bunnies were born. And I think there's no sense of how if you can't like pass that on, because we're just gonna get older, right? And I think that's a part of the reason why you don't see a lot of, well, for me personally, I haven't seen a lot of expansions of crews and bigger and newer b-boys come to the scenes as drastic as it was before, because of that, right?
Because of like the lack of people passing it on. Is that
I
what
think
you think?
so. Yeah, absolutely. Like if you take a look where Meiji, you know, PPC was there, 2000. They've been around for a while, and then where Meiji was born, Flow Fanatics, Remedial Crowd, Goggle Brothers. If you think about all of those crews, right, where they were around the same time frame, right? And now it's just like you hear a lot of Remedial Crowd and you hear a lot of Flow Fanatics, and that's it.
Yeah.
Right. And maybe there's some younger guys that I haven't met yet. I'm sure I could be, you know, I'm pretty sure there's a lot of holes in my statements, but at the end of the day, I could tell you like it's not as booming as it used to be before.
Yeah, I could totally tell with that. But maybe it also is like the huge boom of choreography dancing that's kind of I guess in a way taking away from that, because maybe some people who would be more interested or inclined to get into a crew would be kind of scooped up by the choreography scene in a sense.
Right.
But
the choreography scene is definitely growing. You know, like I can see them do a lot of big things, traveling a lot, right? But I think, yeah, you're right. The contrast of it, that sizing up against how many b-boys are coming out of the scene today. Yeah, it looks kind of like a big difference, right?
And I've talked about this before, but there seemed to be, I don't know, to me, like 2006, 2007, around that time or that era, I guess you can say, there was more of a prestige or like a big thing about being a b-boy that there isn't so much now, I don't think. Like again, I'm talking a bit of broad statements, right? But it's not like this for everyone. But to me, that's how I thought of it. I'm like, oh shoot, because when I saw Dangerous Goods battle, like it was a crew battle at Break for Bit, I'm like, holy crap! Like there was some kind of like almost like you could say magic in the air or some kind of vibe that's not here now. It's like it's changed in a certain sense.
Looking back at it now, I would say it's a degree of competition that's lacking now. And what I mean by that is, you know, when we're being mentored in business, competition is a big key in development. And I remember back when we were young and naive, it wasn't just b-boy battles. It was just beef that came out of nowhere. Like, oh, they're from another crew, man. And, you know, like, screw you, man. We hate you kind of thing, right? But we welcome you and we battle and we give props and it's all love after, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the reason why there was a lot of crews. There was a lot of like there's certain degrees of maybe rebellion that we didn't even know about, or like animosity or silent beef, right? And it was just like, okay, that's your crew, this is our crew, you know, we're gonna battle, and then there's a lot of like, you know, like a lot of talk, and I think that, you know, that level of competition and I like to think of it healthy competition, right? But let's just say for what it is, that level of competition back then was a big reason why a lot of crews started to become born out of that. And now I don't see a lot of that. You know, I understand, you know, like I've been gone for a couple of years, but based on what I've been able to, you know, get even hanging out with some of the new guys, or just like, you know, peeping in on the events and whatnot, like I think that level of competition is going, it's kind of fading away, because it's going into unity now, and there's nothing wrong with unity. Because Winnipeg, you know, like Po One had that each one teach one.
Yeah.
Right. And I believe in that too, because again, you have to kind of adapt to the culture. You're evolving. You can't just, you know, old timers have it our old way. You know, back there's like some purists who talk like that, right? No matter what, it has to be the way we used to do it, and you gotta change, right? But it's going into like a unity thing, which is great. But I think that if the scene just kind of like turn up the volume, turn up the dial on the competition a bit more, then you'll see a lot more of that magic in the air.
Let's go into this. I don't know if you have any stories on this, but were there any beefs that you had in breaking that you guys like kind of like settled? Oh, let's throw down or whatever, and then I'm sure people would be like, "Whoa, what's that like?"
Not really me personally. On the b-boying side of things, even Andrew knows back then it was just more so if somebody wanted to beef, like it wouldn't be, yo, let's go out and battle. It would be like, yo, let's go, let's fist it out outside then, right? Let's go, let's see who. But that was for me, right? So like really there was no beef in the battles, but I remember coming up when the battle would get intense, but we knew it was out of pure sportsmanship. Mm-hmm. But I remember seeing like one of the biggest beefs before was even, Dangerous Goods and Quick Beats.
That was the one I'm thinking about. The one, was it the push one?
Well, that was when SWAT. Well, yeah, SWAT was. They stepped away because Quick Beats was like swatted B-Boys by mistake, right? Yeah, when Arthur and Champ went at it at that one jam, right?
Yeah, that's the one I'm thinking of. I was like, oh snap! What's like I've never seen that before.
Yeah, whatever the story was, right? But to me, when I first saw that, I was like, oh, that's crazy, right? Here it is. This is the real B-Boy. And then later on, it was just like small stuff. Like I remember, there was like back and forth between Gago and PPC a little bit. I didn't really think much of it. Mm-hmm. I thought it was all game. I thought it was just all b-boying thing. But for me personally, no, I never really had beef with anybody. Not in the b-boy scene, at least, because it's either one of us knew that if it did, then it wouldn't go towards the cypher. It would go straight outside, right? And someone was gonna get knocked out, right? And I had to make sure it wasn't gonna be me. I'm just kidding.
We were talking a little bit about this before the podcast as well. That you were into MMA at one point, like a lot. Like, what was that like? Well, what kind of sparked that?
I think it was just only because I was always a big kid growing up, and I wasn't really good at anything. I didn't really go into deep, hardcore training with MMA, but me and a couple of my cousins were like huge UFC fans. And whenever we saw each other, we just like go at it and grapple in the basement and then just practice moves and stuff. But I think when it got, it's just years of repetition of that. I was never really formally trained. But you could learn. Like I wish I went into real Brazilian jiu-jitsu as opposed to just learning, right off the monitors of computers and TVs and just practice on the carpet and get rug burns and whatnot, right? But it was years of that, because then that's all we did, right? That gap between 2001 and 2006 before I got back into breaking, those 5 years of just solid, that was our exercise. And that's all we were ever good at, right? So yeah, that's how it pretty much was. It wasn't like black belt jiu-jitsu and stuff like that. But we did practice. We got each other hurt pretty bad. We kicked each other for real and stuff. So, oh man, yeah. And no shots to the face. That's the only thing, right?
This is the money maker.
Yeah, you don't want to end up like Chuck Liddell and your cousin and your auntie get mad at you, right? Oh.
Did anybody record that? No. Do it again.
So,
that's funny. With the MMA thing, because I forgot what I was gonna go into again. But in any case, I think Andrew kind of turned me on to UFC like maybe 3-4 years ago.
Yeah,
maybe even 5 years ago. What I was gonna say, I learned all the moves and stuff, like the positions, like full mount,
right,
half guard, side control. I learned that from like the UFC game on Xbox.
Yeah, or watching Ultimate Fighter or like Fight Night, UFC Fight Nights.
Yeah, it was for me. It was mostly the video game, because like I want to win at this game. Yeah. So I learned all the positions and stuff, and it's do you follow it at all anymore?
Sometimes if there's a big fight, I just look it up on YouTube. If I can watch and have a drink at the tavern, or if it's there, but I think it's changed a lot, because back when we were watching UFC, it was always the same champion, right? Like how long did Matt Hughes hold his championship as a welterweight? Mm-hmm. How long did Chuck Liddell or Rich Franklin? And then now it's like there's always new talent like coming out, and sometimes you have like a title holder hold his title for like 2-3 fights and then gone. Right. Yeah. Back then it was just like 20 fights undefeated, or never lost his belt or whatever. Right. So it's evolved now a lot. It's crazy the talent you see.
Anderson Silva just holding on to that middleweight championship for like ever.
Yeah, and that goes to show that nothing ever lasts, right? Everything will pass, whether it's good or bad. But it's just like, if you take the idea of that, where did the new breed of UFC fighters come from? From the old breed.
Yeah.
It's because there was, and then now the people you saw as champions, you see them as coaching the coaches on the new champions, right? You see them in their corner, and when you look back into even the scene here in Bboy or whatever, that's what I would like to see. Is just like the old people like bringing it in correct to the new guys. Right?
That's what I want to see in both the scenes that we were like talking about a lot in this episode. Is that the dance scene and also like the business scene? Like, who are the future mentors that are trying to help the ones coming up nowadays? And I think it's a struggle for people to find mentors like that. Like, who's going to be willing to give up their time and some of their effort to raise somebody into that. So which leads me into another question, like, how would you go about, like, let's say somebody's listening to this, they want to look for somebody to maybe be a mentor in life or just, in business or even in dance. Like, how would you give them any advice on how to do that?
It's simple. You got to find someone who has what you want, and you got to ask them if, would I trade places with that guy or with that girl? If you want to learn b-boy, I remember there was a period for me where I practiced with Dark Mark a lot. And I used to pick him up is because I knew I can't just ask him for his time and go teach me. It's like I knew along with mentorship came a lot of other things too. So I would pick him up for a couple weeks and just bring him to whatever session spot, and I would just like closely watch him and monitor his moves, because to be honest, you got to if I wanted to learn what he was able to portray. So if you want to find a mentor, you got to find someone who has what you want, and then you got to be willing to give a little bit.
Right. So that exchange where you like kind of invest in your mentor, because like nobody wants to be just like giving something and not getting anything in return, right?
Absolutely. Like I'll put an example. When my best friend Joel first got into business with me, I mentored him, but he took it and made it his own, and that's who he is today. But if you ask him first, it wasn't just knowledge. This guy was, when I woke up, he was up before me. He was, if he could give me a ride just to have that moment in the car together, so then that way he could pick my brain, it was that. If he meant like buying me lunch or buying me dinner just so he could have his notepad out and pick my brain again, it was stuff like that. I don't think people understand, or they need to understand, all the things that it takes to be, not just to be a mentor, but to be mentored from somebody. Right? It's more so like here's an example, right? Like I saw this quote: if you could either have one or the other, which one would you pick? $1 million in cash, or live a year with Bill Gates?
Live a year with Bill Gates.
Right. And most people just, they want, but they, like we live in a consuming society right now, right? It's like, it's always take. But if you want to actually receive properly, you need to be able to give properly, right? So if you want a mentor, go look for someone who has what you want, and be willing to do whatever it takes until you become that, or that old saying, right? Until your idols become your rivals.
Well, it's interesting that you gave that example with the spend a year with Bill Gates or $1 million, like straight off the bat, because like the $1 million is very short term, right? Like maybe you'll have that. Obviously there's ways of leveraging that, but how much information can you get from Bill Gates, who's like a billionaire, right? So, and a lot of things that I feel like that are kind of plaguing people today is that they always want to go for the quick fix.
Yeah.
This is the Band-Aid over the thing, or whatever it is, right? It's just a quick fix. But what about long term? What about that? What about like 20 years from now? What about 30 years from now? And what about knowledge that will gain you more income rather than just the income itself? Because how do you think like you just like even if you just got that $1 million, you wouldn't get any knowledge from it. You just be like, oh, I have $1 million. What do I do with this now? And if you're an average person, it's probably not like the best things like you to do with that,
it's
right?
The
like
lottery mentality.
Yes, lottery mentality. Like, so I'm just gonna spend this. Or what about like investing in something? Or what about turning that into some assets that will make you more income? Like average people don't know about that, and without knowledge, then the money is gonna just run out eventually.
Well, you made a good comment. You know, like you said that money. Well, really, money really isn't a thing, right? Like when you think about that example, Bill Gates didn't become a multi-billionaire by accident, right? And a lot of people want what Bill Gates has, but are you willing to do what Bill Gates does, right? That's the real question, right? Is because you can give somebody $1 million and you'll see what they do with it, right? But you could teach someone how to make $1 million and see what they do with it. Because if like there's that old saying, you know, when the market crashed, multi-billionaire Donald Trump lost a lot of his money, and he regained a lot of his money back. Right? Because what thing he didn't lose was, even if he lost millions of dollars, one thing he didn't lose was his millionaire mind.
Right.
And you can't take that away from somebody. And you just if you hand $1 million over to someone who had $20,000 work ethic, that's gone.
Yeah.
Right. That's complete complacency there. Right. So I think it's the same thing with any result. Like I know we're talking about money here, but let's take that and turn it into something that you want to see. Whether you want to get into the music industry, whether you want to become get into the dance scene, right? Everybody wants it right now, but it's what you work towards to getting it that allows us to have a conversation like this, right? Yep. A lot of people want to I remember saying to one of my business coaches, "Oh, I just wish I could fast forward this thing and go to the millions right away," right? And everyone would love that, but then he goes, "Man, you could, but then that means you just wouldn't have a story to tell."
Yeah, there's no character behind it as well.
Absolutely.
Like, that's one thing you could tell also if you give, it could be any amount of money. Like you could, so here's $100. You give $100 to an average person, like middle class person. Okay, let's see what they do with it. Oh, maybe I'll buy some like headphones or something, right, or whatever. And then you give it to somebody who has the mindset, oh, okay, I need to duplicate this, or I need to grow this. And let's see what they do with it. So the character of a person really determines a lot of things, even if you just give them like $100, $50, whatever it is.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah, man. How long have we been going for, man?
Hour and 10 minutes.
Hour and 10 minutes, man. Is there anything you want to mention on this podcast while we have you here on this platform?
Yeah, man. Like, CypherTalk's dope. I've been I told Angelo that I found it when I saw Jonel's picture on YouTube. But you know, to bring awareness to pick and just to kind of pick the brains of people who are in Winnipeg and to spread that awareness, it's important. And I think you kind of realize, even for myself being here, like a lot of the things we said, you know, we go out and we give our opinions and whatnot, but sometimes we end up talking to ourselves too, right?
Yeah.
And you realize that, and that's the growth part of it. I think a lot of people, they go out to be fed, you know, they want to come to things to be fed, but what can you do to give? What can you do to go out and feed? Right. And I think that makes the difference between, you know, having different people here. You know, if I could really say anything, you know, it says in the name CypherTalk, you know, like in most of the cases, the subject that you bring up is dance and hip hop, right? If I could say anything, is like what Egg said on his last podcast, right? Learn your history, you know, solidifying your roots. Because, you know, if you don't know that, like, what the hell was it for anyway in the future? Yeah. Like, I remember, like, I had this, I used to work for a jewelry company, and they said that the president asked each of us managers, asking us, you know, like, do you know the executive team in this country? Do you know the executive team in your country, in this country? And barely any of us would actually be able to say it, because it was a worldwide country. And then he goes, then what the hell are you here for? You're telling me that we work so hard to make a worldwide business and all you care about is yourself? And that woke me up, right? And I think if we start to get rooted and fundamentally rooted and understanding of what you want to do and where you come from, and even what you do, where what you do comes from, then it'll be so much clearer the path ahead, right? Because, yeah, I think that's important.
Whoa. Yo. I want to thank you for being on the podcast, man. It's really awesome to hear somebody like you come in here and give your ideas and thoughts, and a lot of them resonates back within myself. So, and I think a lot of people are going to get a lot of value from this episode. It's not one of our super goofy ones or funny ones, but it's really informative, and I think people should really listen to this one and gain some knowledge and hopefully put it into action, which is hopefully the end result with it is put into action all the stuff that we talk about, and not just from me. It's not just come from me. It's come from Josh. So I want to thank Canadian Footwear. We Fit You. We have 3 locations and in Regent, Saint Vital, and downtown location. Come at them if you want to get some shoes, man. Me and my buddy Mark, we work here, and they also allow us to use this awesome boardroom to record our podcast. So shout out to them, Canadian Footwear, We Fit You. CypherTalk podcast, we're out. Any last words?
It's an honor to be here. Keep grinding it out, man. This is excited for the next one.
Awesome. Come back anytime. All right, CypherTalk. Peace.